After that night, nothing was ever the same. I had never felt the weight of betrayal, the consequences of crossing a line, or the burden of regret this closely. Yes, I was at fault. But my husband Murat's neglect, the emotional distance that had grown between us over the years, was slowly consuming me from the inside. He was out of town for work, and that night, the only person who seemed to notice my loneliness was his closest friend, CM. At that moment, I thought I just needed a little attention, a little warmth. But now I know that a single moment can turn a person's entire life upside down. What led me to this point were the disappointments that had been building inside me for years. I remember how much I once loved Murat. Those first years we spent together were so beautiful and peaceful. But over time, Murat became more engrossed in his work. He worked long hours, came home late, and I found myself lost in the silence of our marriage. This silence grew with each passing day, and seeing the love in Murat's eyes became almost impossible. Whenever I tried to open up to him, I was always met with a wall, indifference, and lack of understanding. One of those nights, when Murat was away for work, the loneliness became too much for me. When CM called and asked if I was alone, I wanted to tell him everything was fine, but the words wouldn't come out. Even a few sentences of comfort from him gave me a kind of attention I hadn't felt in a long time. I agreed to let him come over because at that moment, I needed a friend. When CM arrived that night, at first I just wanted to talk a little. Maybe I needed someone to really listen to me. Whenever I talked to Murat, there was always a wall. He wasn't trying to understand me. But with CM, it was always different. It was like he was there to hear the things I hadn't been able to say to myself for years. The words, the feelings, and the resentments that had built up inside me began to pour out naturally in his presence. At first, we just talked about the kids, shared a few memories from the past, and for a few hours I felt like I had escaped that emptiness. But then, when the conversation turned to Murat, Sem's expression changed. There was understanding and sympathy in his eyes. "Elif," he said, "I didn't know you felt so alone." It was such a simple sentence, yet it meant so much. At some point, he put his hand on my shoulder. There was something in that touch of warmth, a closeness I hadn't felt in a long time. Something inside me began to change. I told myself it was just a friendly gesture, but deep down, I was already questioning the situation. Neither of us pulled away, and it felt like we were both being drawn toward this moment. The next few hours were a blur, like I was in a dream. The more we talked, the more I felt the weight of my loneliness. I wanted to stop before things got out of control, but a part of me didn't want to let go of this moment. The attention CM showed me was something I hadn't received from Murat in years. It felt like everything I needed was right there, and that feeling pulled me in even deeper. That night, when the words ran out, something shifted between us. At first, we were just friends, but then, everything became blurry. I thought my feelings for Sam were just a result of my loneliness. Maybe they were. But in that moment, even if it was just for a fleeting second, I felt valued and understood, and I wanted to hold on to that moment no matter the cost. When he held my hand, I turned away and wanted to stop. But something inside me told me this was right. Maybe this feeling was just my momentary weakness, or perhaps it was the release of years of built-up emptiness. But whatever it was that night, the line was crossed. And once that line is crossed, neither Sam nor I could go back to what we were. The weight of what I had done immediately descended upon me. The betrayal I committed against Murat merged with my guilt. It was a burden too heavy to ignore. But CM, he saw this moment as a strengthening of our bond. He talked to me, tried to console me, but it only intensified my guilt. Inside, I started feeling both gratitude and a sense of responsibility towards CM. But at the same time, I questioned my loyalty to Murat. I hated myself, but part of me couldn't escape the passion of this forbidden relationship. This conflict was consuming me from within. The next day, when Murat came home, I had to act like everything was normal. But this was much harder than I expected. When I looked at him, the love I once felt for him was crushed under the weight of my guilt. I wanted to tell him the truth, to confess everything. But no matter how much courage I gathered, the words wouldn't come out. Because I was afraid of losing him, and maybe that fear only complicated my feelings for CM further. Murat continued his indifference. When he came home, he spent some time with the kids, and then buried himself in his phone. Even at dinner, we spoke with our eyes averted. It was as if there was an invisible wall between us. This wall made me feel even lonelier, and that loneliness only strengthened my connection to CM. The guilt inside me turned into anger. I was angry at Murat for making me feel this way. For all those years, he couldn't see how much I needed him. But even though I was angry with him, my guilt weighed heavier. Looking into Murat's eyes became harder and harder with each passing day. I wanted to confess what I had done, but I couldn't find the courage. Inside, the weight of this secret and my confused feelings toward Murat left me feeling even more helpless. Days passed in a haze of uncertainty and guilt. Every morning I woke up, carrying this secret while constantly questioning my relationship with CM. This couldn't go on any longer. Even though I felt something for CM, I knew I had to end this relationship. But it wasn't easy. CM had grown more attached to me after that night. I could feel it in every conversation, every look in his eyes. One day I realized the distance between Murat and me had grown so wide that I couldn't bear this burden any longer. I told Sam that everything had to end. In that moment, the disappointment and sadness in his eyes sparked a new wave of guilt inside me. Sam tried to accept my decision, but the disappointment was too deep. Elif, he said, almost whispering, "Do you really want this?" I didn't want to hurt him, but I knew there was no other way. Inside, I felt both gratitude and anger towards CM, because I couldn't even distinguish who was truly at fault or how we had gotten to this point. But continuing this relationship would only deepen the mistake I made with Murat. This was more than CM could understand. The warmth and understanding he once showed me were now replaced with sadness and uncertainty. Saying goodbye to Sem that night was incredibly hard. Both of us knew this wasn't going to end well. The chaos we created wasn't just affecting us, but everyone around us. He wanted to change things, but I had come to realize we were on an irreversible path. After parting ways with CM, my guilt toward Murat only grew. I had now entered an irreversible path and had to live with this burden. Murat had noticed that something was wrong between us, but he didn't ask, he didn't dig. Perhaps he wasn't ready to admit what was happening between us. This stirred anger inside me. For years I stood by his side, supported him, and yet he couldn't see the conflict within me. It only pushed me further away from him. But at the same time, every time I looked at him, a sea of guilt and regret surged within me. Looking at our children's faces, it reminded me of this silent guilt every day. I wanted to take back my mistake. But once that line is crossed, there is no turning back. Now, when I look back, I can still feel the weight of everything I experienced. I betrayed my husband Murat, I betrayed my friend CM, and most of all, I betrayed myself. As I carried this weight, I tried to reconnect with my family. But this wasn't an easy process. There are still some nights when I wish it had all been just a dream. But every morning, when I wake up, the weight of reality is crushingly real. Maybe life sometimes drags us to unexpected places. The line between right and wrong becomes blurred on this journey. But no matter what, the mistakes we make shape who we are. Now I have to learn to live with this regret. And perhaps the hardest part of all is learning how to forgive yourself what the future held for us anymore. Thank you for watching and listening to my story. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this.